Well, for more reflections on that game, particularly from the RSL side, we welcome into the show. Nedum Onouha is with us. Nedum, thank you very much for your time. Obviously, you didn't go down to Orlando. Were you up at 7 a.m. watching this game?
Well, I was up at 6:45 getting ready to watch the game. Yeah, it was an interesting game. I think the early goal kind of changed the way it probably would have gone if it was 0-0 for a bit longer. I think it would have been more competitive overall, but it's one of those things. I think we're just happy that we got through, and I think it's probably the same for KC as well.
Yeah, they kind of knew they were already through, so that obviously is going to affect their performance, isn't it?
And I think it did a little bit, but I think that's more of a subconscious thing. I think overall they had a game plan, and I think to concede a goal so early kind of affects it a little bit. But I think from when the goal was scored, KC were comfortable, maybe dropping off a little bit more, and so I think we played quite well, but it definitely was missing that element of being desperate to get a result, if you know what I mean.
How's it watching your team? It must be so frustrating.
It's tough. It's probably tougher than I would have imagined, but I made my decision, and I'm very happy to be around my family. I had my kids around watching this morning as well. I don't know how interested they were, but it is tough watching. But then in the same breath, I've seen what the team's been working on in the weeks leading up to the tournament. So yeah, to see how they're trying to implement some of those ideas is quite good.
I imagine you've been chatting a lot to your teammates who are down there. How are they dealing? First of all, how are they dealing with the early kickoffs? That seems to be the toughest thing.
This is their first game that they've played early. I think the previous two have been the late kickoffs. So I think with that took more of an adjustment because they were going to training sessions at like 9:30 at night, and that is a long, long way from normal. But I think this switch up now, I think it was tough, but I think it was tougher just because they're making the adjustment from having played games at 10:30 at night to playing a game at 9 in the morning. So I think the transition, I'd say, was hard, but more so just because of the change from kickoff times.
How are they dealing with the overall environment down there?
From the people I've spoken to, I think they're all positive. I think the fact that we have such a good squad and people are very much together, I think it goes a long, long way. Because the situation is far from ideal, and I don't think people would ever choose to be in it. But now they're in it, I think they're fully committed to just doing everything they can to try and win the event, because otherwise, what's the point in being there? And I think the league have put certain things on for them, which is keeping them entertained. But I think the fact that they have each other is going a long, long way, because if there was any sort of like break in terms of players not getting along with each other and so on, I think it would be a catastrophe. But I think most of the clubs around the league have got great squads, so everyone's just cracking on with it.
Just changing gears slightly, you take a look at your career. Obviously, you started at Manchester City. Could you even imagine that we'd be talking about Manchester City now in 2020 as one of the biggest clubs in the world?
Honestly, no, because I joined in '95, and I was 10 years old. I joined the academy, and at the time it wasn't great, and it wasn't great for a few years. I think it was only '98, '99 when I think we were in the playoff final for like what is League One now. So as I say, to then see them now being spoken about in terms with the same greats of world football, it's incredible to see. But the investors, they came in, the owners, they came in, and they didn't just have a short-term vision, it was a long-term vision. And with that, it was a case of not just changing what happened on the field, they were changing the things from the training ground to the staff to the mentalities. And now when you walk into that building, the expectation from everybody is that you do the best in your job and try and be the best that you can be throughout the whole industry, as opposed to just trying to do the best that you can just for yourself in that situation.
It must have been a bit bonkers. Like all of a sudden, Robinho's there and Balotelli's there. It must have been almost kind of fairy tale stuff.
The Robinho one's the bigger one than the Balotelli one, because the Robinho one came out of nowhere. So there we were, we just finished training, and then you're at home and you see that the club's just been bought. So you're like, okay, well, how's this going to affect us? And then you see they've bought Robinho in, but we were just watching Robinho play for Real Madrid. And City at the time, for as progressive as we weren't in the same bracket as a team like a Real Madrid in terms of players coming there or whatever. But now there's one that's flying over, and he's going to be training with you tomorrow or the day after. And it was insane because, he was the first real top tier one type player to come over. And to see him there and to all of a sudden just that's the norm. It was crazy. But now you're looking at that squad, and from 1 through to 11, I think the type of players that they have now are really just as good as they come.
What was more impressive, Robinho's ability to party or what he did on the training ground?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think, to be fair, with Robinho, I've seen this a lot with Brazilians. They just love life and they love family and they love to celebrate. But in fairness to him, when it was time to work, he would work. So I'll shoot him a bit of bail there.
As you mentioned, you look at 1 through 11. In fact, the whole squad at the moment just full of quality everywhere you look. Is there enough quality there to win the Champions League?
I would say yes. I would say there is. Whether or not there's enough sort of understanding of what's required at this final stage now, I'm not sure. Whereas you have certain teams who have a pedigree of being there every single year, like a Real Madrid, which is ultimately they're going to be a very, very dangerous side. They've just won the league, and it's fair to say over the past 5-6 years, it almost feels like they've monopolised the competition itself. So it'll be tough, but I don't think there'll be many teams who look at City and think that this is who they'd like to be playing at this stage of any competition. So they are very, very capable, but it's just about trying to get over the line, and hopefully they've got enough experience in there to be able to do so.
The criticism that is normally pointed at City is their vulnerability at the back.
Yes, it is. It is. But you could kind of argue the same about Real Madrid to a certain extent. I don't think the way that the success that they've had across the past few years has been built on them being, say, impenetrable or anything like that. And I think if it's going to come out to a shootout, then maybe that suits the Real Madrid, maybe that suits the Man City. I think it's very rare. I think it was just the other day you saw they didn't score, and that was the first time in a while. So I'd expect the games from now through to the final, if they make it, to be high-scoring affairs. And the best form of defense sometimes is attack. So yeah, it'd be nice if you could keep clean sheets and stuff like this. But you're not going to win anything unless you can score some goals, and I think they're very capable of doing that.
Sergio Ramos, of course, suspended for that second leg as well. A huge, huge advantage for Manchester City. After City, you went to QPR, and really you just experienced all of the emotions of the game, from relegation to promotion. And that's something, look, as much as people advocate for it here, we're never going to see in MLS, because if you're owner of a franchise, why on earth would you want to see relegation? Do you think US soccer is missing out on that?
I think missing out is one way to describe it, but I don't think people would really buy into it, because it's also a very, very stressful situation. Because as some people don't realize, is if you're down there at the bottom and you are fighting for survival, it's to guarantee your pace, to guarantee your work, but also to guarantee the work of so many people that work within a football club. So that type of stress there isn't something that you'd ever vote to bring in. But then also the other side of it is when you do bring it in and you play under more pressure, I think you start to see players develop in a different way, because every decision that they make has it almost feels like it has more value to it. Every game matters. And I think sometimes for some players in MLS, not every player, maybe not even the majority, but some players sometimes they do things because they don't feel the weight of expectation on their decisions. But when, as I say, you play in other leagues, whether it's promotion, relegation, you could make a mistake which could send down your team, which could cost the club millions, which could cost people their jobs and things like this. And so you learn to not take those chances, if you know what I mean. But it's not necessarily purely cagey. But as I say, when you step out there, you almost feel like it means more. Whereas I think overall in the MLS, for some people, it can still feel like a hobby which you're being paid for. Whereas outside of it, this is work. This is what we have to do. And people buy into it differently. And
how do you put that across to the team? Because I imagine, obviously, knowing what you know and the experience that you had in Europe coming in, and if you see people treating like a holiday, I can imagine that's got to be one of the most frustrating things, isn't it, as a professional? I think it can be, but I think you'd probably find that all around the world. And I think the difference really is when you're in England or something, and there's a kid that's coming through. As soon as you make the transition from being an academy player to being a first team player, you need to understand that the people who you play with now, they're paying for mortgages and stuff like this. So it's not just a case of playing with your peers anymore, hoping you can win something. Like, you have to survive, because your life, your livelihood is huge. It's everything to you. If going down could mean that maybe you have to move out of your house and stuff like this. So I think outside of the United States, people still do have that mentality, but it gets pushed away really quickly because you won't be selected. A coach won't select you. Your teammates won't trust you and things like this. Whereas more so over here, maybe that level of scrutiny doesn't exist as much. Some people have it, and you can see them loud and clear within the league because they really thrive. They're very successful. They make different decisions and they see the game differently. But like I say, for some, if a team is finishing bottom of the MLS at this moment in time, what's
what their incentives going forward? Do they feel real pressure to try and get off the bottom, or is it a case of they're just going to build for the next year? Whereas in most other places, you don't have the opportunity to build for the next year, so you have to change your approach. But overall, the approach here, whatever it is at the start of the season, it tends to be what it is at the end of it.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.